Welcome back, Carter. I've always wanted to say that.
You wanted to? Oh, I guess. Oh, yeah.
It's a thing. So today we're
That's it.
back and we're going to hit it hard. We got 45 minutes. We're going to get through the rest of what happened last week. Lots on the
Yep.
table, right? So we're going to talk about how consumers are moving faster than institutions. The reality that big ag and CPG is kind of stuck in neutral, but the road's kind of going uphill, and I would add to that I think healthcare is doing the same. And then startups, that there's a real opportunity here for startups, and there's also a challenge, which is product market fit, and the fact that the capital market is really in starvation mode a bit.
Yes.
And I think
There are no VCs investing right
there are
now.
no VCs investing. But I do think on that note, though, when we do talk about pivots, what should be on CPG's list? So if CPG does listen to this and say, okay, fine, what should I be doing? Right? What would be on the list? And from a retail perspective, same thing. What should we paying
Yeah.
attention to? And then if you're an ag CEO, what are some of the things that we're looking at? And I guess from a
Yep.
funding perspective, right? Some arbitrage. So like I said, we got to hit it hard. We got to pound
Okay.
through
So
it.
we want to drive into what consumers are doing.
Yeah, let's do that first.
Yeah. So I think building on GLP-1s and our conversations around pre-chronic and where people are gaining trust. So without a doubt, we covered this at the tail end yesterday. GLP-1s are starting to influence things. We're hearing stockouts of ground beef. So people think about, oh, we're going to move over to protein or keto. We got to eat steaks. No, people are eating ground beef. People are making these shifts. They're eating cottage cheese, and they're coming in very specifically. So the consumers, while people are saying, oh, consumers need to be trained what to do with GLP-1s, the early adopters in the GLP-1 space are also early adopters in nutrition, and they're starting to really drive change faster than the institutions can sort of scratch their head and say, you know what, I think we need to have diet programs for people that are on GLP-1s. Consumers will figure it out. That's an opportunity for grocery to step in. We've been constantly saying that grocery, if you had a choice on who should be in charge of helping people with nutrition, is it your doctor or is it the grocery store? It's somewhere in between, but it's our bias is towards the grocery store.
Well, it's towards a redesigned grocery store,
Yeah.
right, with the elements that you don't get from healthcare that do need to be present when it comes to guidance.
And when I think about all the startups, we've looked at 6,500 startups over the last 10 years, maybe 7,000. And I think about all the startups that have tried to solve this chronic disease problem. And if I were to say I want to start that problem from the grocery side first and move towards healthcare, or the healthcare side and move towards grocery, I'd pick grocery every day of the week.
Absolutely.
Which then leads a little bit to this shift that we've been calling pre-chronic. So these are 20 to 40-year-olds, a little bit lean more towards millennials. They are people that do not engage heavily in the healthcare system. They likely don't have a care provider that they trust on a regular basis. When they walk into their care provider and they said, I read Dr. Lustig's book or I read Mark Hyman's book, and the doctors are like, what are you talking about? Who is this quack? And so they get turned off. And so they are frustrated. They are digital natives. And this pre-chronic crowd, folks like hims and hers are picking them off, and they're making them cash pay. They're still delivering healthcare in a different form, maybe more pharmaceutical. I think with the blow up of the PBMs coming, or are we thinking the PBMs are going to change and we're going to see different price points on pharmaceuticals? There's a huge opportunity to really sort of address the under 40-year-olds that even when they have health insurance, they will cash pay simply to avoid the friction of having to deal with what the boomers go through when they talk to a health provider.
Yep.
They see it in their parents. They see their parents are sick and not being treated, and the pre-chronic are also people that are going to get diabetes. If nothing, they're not like perfect worried well, like I'm an Olympian, but I won't admit it. These are people who are going to get chronic disease, high probability, 90% probability.
We have to look at the statistics, Carter. at least 60 to 75% of people are going to get it.
Yes.
Like, this isn't, that whatever, like, this is a huge number. This is the reality of
more likely than COVID, isn't it?
Yes.
Maybe. Yeah. That's sort of, yeah, like we were so worried about COVID, and then there's another crowd that's very worried about dyes in food, which are important things to worry about. The thing screaming at us is 238 people dying every day of type 2 diabetes that is totally avoidable.
Absolutely.
So the pre-chronic crowd are ready to disconnect, and if they never enter the traditional healthcare system, as soon as they get diabetes or pre-diabetes, they then move into a standard of care, very formulaic, that manages them from that point of diagnosis to the point that they die early because of complications associated with chronic disease. The healthcare system manages that very effectively.
I call BS on that. They don't manage it very effectively.
Okay, they don't. I'm sorry. They make $500,000 off of it.
Exactly.
And so that's the pre-chronic. And then so they are moving faster than the institutions. The GLP-1 customers are moving faster than the institutions. The pre-chronic are moving faster. And those two forces alone are going to suck capital out of the healthcare system faster than healthcare can react. And then the final bit is trust. Trust your doctor. And the problem is when you go to your doctor and you've read Mark Hyman's book, or you've read Bob Lustig's book. Or
I'm going to stop you because we have the prime example. So, I put the video up yesterday of this part 1 conversation. I did a very small snippet and put it on LinkedIn this morning. Somebody responded to that very small snippet, and it was actually about influencers. And it was about the fact that we don't really trust, right? We don't trust the sources that we're supposed to trust. And this person said, ever since I figured out that food could make me healthy, my world has changed. And I went back and said, I'm just curious, what was that helped you change? And he quoted, I read Bob Lustig's book, Metabolical. I read Good Energy by Casey Means. And then he also mentioned the Ludwig. I mean, literally those 3 books in a post today. So you don't even have to keep going. Like, this is reality, right? Just like regenerative ag, you ask people, they're going to say, here are the movies that I watched. Or what about ultra processed food? Well, here are the movies that I watched, right? I watched Game Changers and I learned I shouldn't eat like that. I mean, there you go. Doctors are not paid, trained, or able to provide the type of guidelines that we need, the type of advice that we need.
And doctors are doing a great job on acute care.
Correct.
And they have a hard time. I mean, when the source cause is nutritional quality and nutrition, to really sort of expect the doctors by some magic are going to wag the tail of the dog to cause the problem to go away is a bit unreasonable.
Yep.
And they have no economic incentive. Their systems have no economic incentive. There's really not much other than their moral fortitude that really prepares them to be really effective on that. And with that, they do. So they're great humans. But the concept of trust, it's not necessarily that they are anchored on Food Babe, but Food Babe says something that they start questioning. And in their questioning, they start realizing the key point here is those vectors of trust. It is as reasonable as we discussed yesterday that a food company might very well take one of those influencers and use that influencer to say, our brand is good for you. And instead of trying to put, we're good for you on the label at the store, that it is likely that the forward-leaning processed food companies that are trying to influence this and improve it and try to improve health are very likely to lean into the influencers as an effective means of communicating with consumers. And that the speed of that is going to cause things to shift a lot faster than the institutions can. And even yesterday in our conversation around labels, we're making these we may very well, FDA may make these changes to front of package labels, which has got some advantage, but the consumers are probably still way ahead of them in terms of their understanding of what products have what.
Absolutely.
So that's an incredible force.
All right, so let's jump. Big Ag and CPG stuck in neutral while the road tilts uphill.
Yeah, so this is a comment that we do have an opportunity and the privilege of sort of talking to senior leaders at processed food companies and the ag companies, and they are sort of stuck. On the CPG side, they've got this sort of change going on with consumers around GLP-1s that are shifting over towards real food. They feel regulatory pressure, so RFK is sort of hinting, there's a little feeling that like RFK might be lining up a little bit, not that he's said this, but he might be lining up in a tobacco like lawsuit, or others might be lining up in a tobacco like lawsuit around metabolic disease. And you've got the dyes, and so one, they're worried on that side, and two, if they move forward and say, look, we're going to do a better for you brand, you then have conflicts. Like if you're a soda brand and say we're going to come up with a better for you, then does that mean the other stuff's not good for you? So there's that, and they also aren't quite sure how to source better product out of the supply chain. That's new stuff. How do you do it affordably? How do you do it scale? And they're also uncomfortable. They're like, do consumers really want to eat better?
They don't believe that. They really don't.
They don't believe it, or they don't know how to reach it in a way that they can move a ship. So
this goes
easier to do.
It goes hand in hand with healthcare. So there is a belief within healthcare that people don't want to change. And there is a belief within food that people don't really want to change. And there's also a belief within healthcare that it's not really going to make a difference. And I think food has the same fear. So we haven't proven that people can change. And if they do, we haven't proven how much money that's going to save. And I think with food, we haven't proven that people at scale want to get healthier, and we haven't proven what the business model looks like if they actually do, and how we play in that space. And the crazy part is that each industry could steal from each other if they kind of figured that out, or more beautifully, they could partner together.
And so finishing up one point on Big Ag and circling back on this. So the ag companies, which, we say Big Ag, but like they're a fraction of the size of Apple. So you just in context, these are complex companies. They have to bring products to market, meet regulatory standards. There's a lot of back pressure on herbicides. There's back pressure on other chemicals. There are a lot of questions about regenerative. And so if you're the CEO of one of these companies, you're sitting here, it's like, okay, and agriculture has got overcapacity right now, and so there's revenue pressure, profitability pressure on farmers. It's going to last a few years. You have Brazil is coming online very productively and creating additional economic pressure. And so if you're the CEO of one of these companies and someone says, you guys need to think smarter and better, you've got this tension of your revenues are off. You've got the pressure. You're not quite sure what the regulatory environment's going to be on new product. It's almost easier to just sort of say, look, we're not going to do Roundup any longer, and then roll back to old technology as opposed to advancing. And what we've been trying to do a little bit with the soil health discussion is say, look, if we can work to common soil health and develop new herbicides that are maybe bio-based or sensitive. I mean, even water is a herbicide in rice. So there are ways in which, killing weeds does not have to be necessarily bad, but it's very difficult, whether you're an ag CEO, a CPG CEO, or a healthcare CEO, to know whether you want to step out in traffic here, which is a great arbitrage. It does mean, like, are you going to reformulate? Should a CPG reformulate products without, like, just go through and take the sugar or reduce the sugar or reduce the fructose in their product? Or should they wait for a regulatory action? these are not easy
Or a
decisions.
consumer
And
signal,
so,
or a strong consumer signal.
right, because they're operating in what they perceive as not a strong consumer signal. And so a test I'll give anybody here is ask people whether they want to eat better.
Yeah.
Like I know that everybody's sort of excited about the Oreo Reese's thing.
I
And
have
today
the
there was
pre-sale up. I actually have the pre-sale up on my computer, and I was questioning that. I really feel like I want to pre-sale order them just so that I can taunt you with them.
do you I'm on the Prolon diet this week, so I'm on a fasting
Hey
this
man, I
week.
just
So
ate a kale salad with like lupini beans on it. So I mean, I appreciate that I did get a
even
lot of
that
volume. I know when I'm on Prolon, I would do anything for a kale salad, and I do like a kale salad.
one shout out to Prolon, their new soups that are come pre-made. You don't have to put water on them. Are really good.
Well,
Um,
you know what? I'll text Joseph after this, the CEO, Joseph Anton, and be
yeah.
like, Joseph, it was really good.
So the next conversation here is around startups. And a challenge that startups have. And
I do want to say one thing about the big ag thing and the big food. You know, one thing that hit me last week when we were in some of those meetings in DC was the statement that, because you just talked about the size of ag as an industry, but I think what's really interesting is that may be size in terms of revenue, but politically, the power that ag has in this country is pretty profound. And although I should have understood that, I really didn't understand the gravity of that until we were discussing the Maha report last week with leadership. And the point was made that big ag is actually quite a bit more powerful than even big pharma. And I think that was a really important note to make here in what's going to happen from the Maha report and just moving forward politically.
yeah, I think especially as it applies to we are a republic, and there are a lot of Midwest states that vote.
Yep.
And that vote has a big impact on the Senate and the presidency. I'm not sure I agree. Pharma seems pretty effective.
Yes, but it was
But
just an interesting take.
there is certainly a strong base of voters that will affect the Senate, and frustrated farmers vote. And I think that the current president owes part of his election in part to those farmers.
Yep.
And so there is a political dynamic. We don't really play politics much, but it's clear from what we heard in the room that there's a political dynamic. I will say that where we have seen major progress before in food innovation at a national scale, it has always involved government and large corporations willing to work together on the issue instead of in opposition to each other. So that's a lesson to build on. But we've got to hop on to startups now.
We do. And I just want to tee this up to say category creation and existing investment thesis, I think, are opportunity / challenge that play into this as well as we talk about this.
Well, so on that front, I think I got to go through some more analysis on the key investment arenas that we want to pay attention to is you might sort of call measurement and verification. And that I would call that whether it's an Earth Optics measuring carbon in soil or a Meriterra looking at microbiomes and nutrition expression in tissue samples and crops, or Audacious looking at nutrition or in the final food, or Holobiome looking at the expression of food and other factors in the human microbiome, and Alden Scientific looking at the proteomics of humans and understanding how their food and diet. I mean, we even have seen a company that can, through proteomic analysis, make judgments on how effective your exercising has been. So that's, call that M&V, call that measurement and verification, call that the data that helps feed it. So that's an area of particularly strong interest of investing now. Nutrient density. We have forever focused on increasing yield in crops. Particular reasons why that backs off on nutrient density. Nutrient density and taste are coupled. If you've got more nutrients that taste better is a typical thing. So the whole area of ingredients, and I think that what may hit the CPGs pretty strongly is they got to rethink about reformulating. I have an Oreo, and I twist it so it's got a little bit more or less fructose. Does it have a little bit more fiber so I get a less of a glycemic spike? It may still be an Oreo. It will taste a lot like it, but I'm going to reformulate it a little bit. I'm going to pull the dyes out. So the whole, how do we do that? How do we do that across our supply chain? How do we do that across South Korea and the United States and meet all the different requirements? Another key area that we're seeing in investing is sort of at the retail level of health. That is either health providers getting closer to the consumers. Like we've seen some clinics appearing that might be storefront diabetes clinics that would be cash pay, and that it appears like you could see that kind of thing going on. It's not covered in Maha report very much, but we can see that sort of shift.
Well, I think where we'll see that covered in the Maha report, and where we're seeing a lot of energy, is more the tech variation of that. So make tech great again, make digital, make health tech great again. It never's been great. So it's kind of funny that we're saying again, because that's truly, like, there was a time where people were healthy. There was not a time that tech was really great in healthcare.
Well, and so there you've got some convergence going on. I think the FDA approved a CGM treatment combined with diet today. I didn't get a chance to read that, but the idea of the inclusion of CGMs or the Hims and Hers of the world, the LifeMD of the world, taking the best of healthcare technology, but delivering it in a completely different way that can scale. And then finally, the fourth major theme that we're seeing on startups that we should all be risk on is regenerative enablers, and that is look, I don't want to be like, I'm not a regenerative fanboy from a standpoint of every single thing in the world has to be regenerative or that's going to happen. That's really not the conversation. The conversation is that regenerative practices boost nutritional density. They reduce crop inputs, and so they become a tool that the farmer can create a value-added product. And so if those markets emerge for value-added products, I want wheat that has more nutritional density that can be used in school lunch and deliver 15 grams of fiber. But if those kind of requests are coming in now, and so if 10% of our production base moves over in that direction, and that represents, because our production is fuel, feed, and food, if 10% of our production base goes over to this and 90% of that 10% is going over to food, that would be a pretty major shift in the quality of our food system. And it does appear that regenerative is moving in. Issue, I'll go say, nope. Ahead, and then I'll give you the issue.
Nope. Well, I was just going to jump back to the FDA approval.
Well, I do want to finish up the issue on startup is we don't have capital. So there is a huge influx of capital into ag tech over the last 10 years. I apologize. The dog is excited. Over the last 10 years. And between shifts in interest rates, a bunch of other things caused the venture market allocations to move away. So we do not have as much capital now to take companies that are now maturing and grow them to the next level. Plus the big companies, the CPGs, the ag companies, the healthcare companies are uncertain what to do, so they're not acquisitive. But the companies are really hitting their stride and they're getting starved for capital. So we as a venture fund are really thinking it's like, this is a good opportunity to really bring in capital that'll probably invest in down rounds on the companies. So that's painful for the companies, but we're going to keep them. We're in that kind of phase that was sort of after the boom of 2000,
Yep.
where everybody thought Amazon was a crappy company, and many wish they had invested. We're sort of in that phase in this industry, and we have a maximum amount of energy with the startups, but really very, very little capital available. And so it will either, we don't know which way this is going to go. Either these companies are going to fail and go out of business and we will lose the opportunity, or the capital markets will lean back in, take advantage of the arbitrage, and invest. But it's going to be messy because there are a lot of great managers of these early stage funds that really don't have the points on the board in terms of exits. But, frankly, we've got 10 years of experience in this market and can see around corners in it.
Well, and I think that's why we have to talk about category. Like, that's why I teed up the conversation that way is.
So explain that more.
So this whole food is health thing that we talk about every day, like 1,000 times a day amongst the two of us, and then we write about, is a new category. It doesn't exist today. There is not a category of food as health, as food as prevention, right? There's food and there's healthcare and there's agriculture, but that's not been put together in a category of, I go to the grocery store and I get health, right? It is delivered to me, not healthcare, health. And so
go ahead.
We need the category. And that's what I think you and I are working really hard to do, is to bring these constituents together, these stakeholders together, to say there is a category here. And the minute that demand is there, then investors are all over that, because they're like, oh, this is a new category that people haven't penetrated. And these are the solutions needed to be successful in that new market.
So let me sort of restate something here and sort of put my MIT hat on.
Yes, please.
And that
be my smart friend.
This is what Clay Christensen really outlined. He basically said in markets, in the y-axis. So if the y-axis was focused on yield and now it's focused on nutrition, that resets the architecture. That means that ADM and Cargill and Nabisco, and they had their businesses, are very horizontally integrated. They really drive price performance. But now all of a sudden, if people are worried less about price performance and they're worried about nutrition because they want to use nutrition to cut down their healthcare costs,
exactly,
you've changed the y-axis. And in that particular case, the New Start tends to win. The New Start is able to move around. They don't have to worry about existing revenues. And so there's a shift in that perspective. And to your point, I personally believe, I could be wrong, I personally believe the consumer's already there.
Yes.
And we saw that, we keep talking about it. The New York Times, 25 to 27% of household healthcare and food costs has consistently combined been 25%, 70 to 27% of household spend for the last 100 years.
I'll even throw the graph in. I'll put the graph in here.
So 100 years ago, it was all food, 2% healthcare, or the rest 5% food. Now it's 18% healthcare, 7% food.
And I think this is where healthcare is making a really big mistake, and I would argue that CPG is making the same big mistake, and grocery, is everyone's trenched, they've doubled down, which goes exactly back to Christensen. And they've doubled down and they're saying, nope, this is what it is. And I'm going to just get better at what I do now. And healthcare is making a huge mistake. They're saying, oh, well, let's just now get into the longevity space. Let's just do, people can get 100 biomarkers tested on their own. You and I have done it, right? You can get a full body scan. Those things are all amazing tools. But if all you're doing is putting crap into your body every minute of the day, all you're going to do is find out earlier that you have the disease, or you're pre-chronic, you're pre-diabetic, you still aren't going to have any idea what the hell to do. Like this is what drives me crazy. I mean, we've done it. I just, superpower, all it is just a bunch of friggin' information that you still have to solve.
Going back to these numbers, 25 to 27% of the household spend is food as health.
Yep.
It is food and health.
Absolutely.
It is that chunk of that chart, and it's been true for 100 years. So it is the natural state of things. And when we do talk about health, I want to be clear because sometimes people get frustrated about this. We mean chronic disease.
Correct.
We don't mean people have cancer, they get HIV. We don't mean that.
Correct.
We're talking about chronic disease, which is type 2 diabetes.
And mainly diet related. What we're really pushing on is diet related chronic disease, which a lot of people don't understand just how broad that category actually is. That there is a tremendous amount of things that people think is genetic or whatever. And when you dig into it, it actually is very much diet related. So, okay, should we move into
inset?
Which one do you want to move into now? You want to?
Well, I'd like to move into insetting because this is.
Let's go there.
We're going to do this in 45 minutes, but let's pretend we're going to do it. So, so there is a concept that there's an orchestration now that has to go on with capital. So, when you make major changes, like when we changed to renewable energy, you had to get the energy companies, the energy providers, the users, the equipment producers all lined up to deploy capital on a project that's going to benefit over 25 to 50 years. There, in the carbon markets, there was something called carbon offsetting. And the purpose of carbon offsetting was to deal with the negative externalities and make people who were beneficiaries of the negative externalities, allow them to invest in the reduction of the externalities. The concept of insetting is that Nestle would pay their supply chain to do something like a cover crop so that Nestle could say on their label that we have not only reduced our carbon, but we've done it within our supply chain. We didn't go buy trees in Brazil. Within our supply chain, we're procuring in a way that is more carbon sensitive. Taking that to the next step is insetting the notion of nutritional density. If you're Costco or you're Walmart, you have an interest in making sure that the infrastructure back on the BLM land or the grasslands, you have an interest in making sure the quality of that soil health improves. And in most other markets, when you need that capital shift going on, it becomes advantageous for the downstream provider, the Costco and Walmart, and to some degree the CPGs, who are closer to the consumer, have a better ability to resource allocate where should those investments go. But the stream upstream is R.C. Carter sitting on the BLM land trying to figure out how to invest and advance things so that he can deliver a balanced omega-3, omega-6 to Whole Foods in the meat that he delivers. And so what's starting to happen in the part that we don't only need to solve the VC part, but we need to send more signals upstream. And so the conversations that went on last week are, one, that the natural capital industry has the capacity to orchestrate. They did this over in climate. Their opportunity to do climate is a little askew under the current administration. But the principles of we have a downstream effect here, there's an upstream benefit. Let's go to the downstream, whether, life insurance. If life insurance can get people to live longer, they make more money. So life insurance has reason to work against chronic disease healthcare and actually take market share away from them. And life insurance wants long-term benefits. So there are reasons why life insurance actually should be investing in assets that are like regenerative oriented farmland, and to provide the extra capital, which has its own return to it. They can use that as part of their asset allocation strategy for managing long-term assets, but they also take the pressure off. Another example is if regenerative crop insurance is $40-50 an acre, if a retailer sees that regenerative crops have less failure rates, maybe it's in the interest of the retailer to offer a captive regenerative insurance program at $20 an acre that reduces the cost of the product that uses the capital. So there are these upstream things that can be done.
Yep.
So the conversations that we've been having with people are around, can we create nutrient density insetting in which Nestle might pay their supply chain to increase the nutrient density of wheat on macros and micros, and to build up capacity. That's one. The other conversation we've had, SNAP. SNAP is $100 billion plus of purchasing power in the United States. It represents, I think, about 7% of the food purchasing in the country. That's a buyer's club in other markets. I mean, people think about it as a benefit of sorts. It's also a buyer's club. We can take POS data at a grocery. We can look at the market basket of SNAP consumers, and we can turn to grocery and even CPG and other retailers and say, look, we will give you a bonus if you can somehow convince consumers that they should try healthier options. And you can do that in your in-store kiosks. You can do it by buying regenerative crops. You can do it by reformulating the Oreos. I don't know what it is, but that's an incentive we've been talking about. We've talked about on our list, we talked about insurance, and also the issue that insurers, and we've talked about insurance, and we've talked about natural capital. So there are two things we need to do on the capital side. One is we have startups that, even though everyone wants to say, oh, those ag tech investments, they really are down. Well, who cares? It's what's coming forward, future cash flows. And those future cash flows are, I'm a CPG, I need to reformulate, I need Bonumose, I need alternate sugars, I need fiber from One Bio, I need Brightseed to help me engineer and fortify my food. We're moving to risk on, and that if that capital's not put in place, then some other startup's gonna have to spend 5 years building the same thing. So now's the time to invest, especially since the prices are down. And then the second part is, we really need to think, if we're talking about food as health, and if the y-axis is changing, like Clay Christensen says, that different parts of the capital chain need to bundle their capital and invest in infrastructure to build it out.
Yeah, totally. And what they're building out is a new category, right? Which last week when we published, we talked about reformulation and portfolio math of basically like a new look for CPG of what they're focusing on, right? We've talked in this about the challenges that they have to change. We haven't really talked about what we're talking about here, right? You've hit on it a little bit. And retail, which is make health the default, I think that's a really big deal. Like, we don't do that right now. And what could that actually look like? And we put some stuff out on what that could look like.
Certainly retail, in many ways, retail thinks that they're selling shelf space.
Right.
And the funny thing is, healthcare really can't deliver prevention for chronic disease.
No.
And grocery has more option to do that and doesn't recognize it. It's like standing in plain sight as an opportunity. I'm not suggesting it's not going to be hard to do.
Economic challenge. People have a very difficult time having faith that consumers will shift their current economic behavior, right?
Well, here's a homework assignment. Assume that they do.
Yeah.
Everybody out there who's running a business is, I don't think consumers are doing this. Just don't do that. I mean, this is standard scenario planning. Assume that they do. What happens to your business?
Yeah.
And go spend a day with your management team and go down that exercise. If the latent demand on consumers is quite high, what does that mean?
Well,
what does it mean if we don't do anything and we just follow? What does it mean if we leave?
And that's in all industries, right? I mean, we could
Every
have we could sit down, we could sit in a room with a healthcare executive team and a massive health system and say, what if you actually prioritize that people want to be healthy? What would
That's
your
a
health
system
system
C
look like?
That is a system C question.
Yes.
You have a current, you can incrementally improve and try to figure out how to deliver chronic disease care better. Or you can, what happens if truly the consumers, especially the pre-chronic, they don't want you to treat chronic disease, they want you to prevent it. And they're only going to do business with people that prevent it. And you might have them for a moment because they walk in with pre-diabetes, but their intuition is as soon as Steve Jobs shows up, the Steve Jobs of prevention shows up and just makes it go away, you will, and the next day, lose your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what it's going to take. And if you don't think, it's a scenario. We did this in defense all the time. You just,
right. What does the scenario look like when demand? What does the scenario look like where consumers are focused on their health? Chronic disease, the pipeline is, let's just say it's cut by 25%, right? What does that mean for hospital beds? What does that mean for volume that you're chasing in the community? And let's say
another step. If consumer household income right now is 7% food,
yep.
18% healthcare, and they sort of say, you know what, I'm ready to fix my health with food rather than healthcare, that 18%, it's not totally portable, but
no, because it's right. But see, this is where high deductible health plans have really created an advantage for the food companies. If you have a $15,000 deductible, right? And you're budgeting any portion of that for healthcare consumption. Some people would say, well, people don't budget for that. Okay, fine. Let's leave those people out of the equation for a moment, because in those folks, perhaps you have to wait for the insurance market to shift a little bit, for employers to get wise, right? Which I think is another huge opportunity. Employers have a huge opportunity here to redesign what health looks like for their employees, right?
Well, this becomes a cascading problem, because this is where the tipping point occurs.
Yep.
As soon as we reach critical mass of consumer power, this is the part that you should do in your scenario. It's not just, do I think consumers will do this? The next step is, do we hit a tipping point? When we hit that tipping point, then you will see where consumers are really revealing themselves. Then you will see insurance companies say, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
We can develop a different product. Or you're going to see life insurance companies say, oh, wait a second. Now, as soon as that group gets revealed, as people honestly want to empower their power on prevention, you will then see that secondary spillover effect to other markets, life insurance and such, health insurance going to high deductible. And at that point, you've lost, because the power of those other entrepreneurs competing against you will feel like you're in the middle of a firefight.
Yeah, and I think it's going to come the other way. I think the spillover. I think these other markets are getting wise, and it's going to happen. So we're out of time again.
We're out of time.
I guess we'll have to do maybe like a wrap up last episode next week. I don't know. I mean, we did get through
we still got like 13 things here, and we got the number 5. So our timing's pretty bad here. But okay.
We tried today to be more expeditious, but
we're going to keep it to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So please, we will do another one of these. We're trying to keep these to 45 minutes. Do comment as to what's helping here or hurting, or how you'd like us to change this.
Yeah.
And
we're happy to open this up to other conversations. So if others want to come on and break apart some of these concepts, let's do it.
And it's happening fast enough that we're realizing we should probably post one of these a week. We're doing 2 this week. But that is our story.
We're sticking to it.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.